Since the last edition of our SMA journal, we've been saddened by the passing of Pope Francis. He's been called the People's Pope, and so many people have fond memories of his work, his writings, and of personal contact with him. In this special extended edition of SMA Journal are some SMA and OLA memories of this much-loved pontiff.
I did meet Pope Francis, and I met him in Rome because we had an assembly in 2019, and all those delegates who gathered for the assembly, the International SMA, at the end of that gathering, we were invited to visit Pope Francis at the Vatican. So on the given date, we proceeded there. We were seated in a hall, and then Pope Francis came in himself. His entry into the room, of course, was great joy for us, and he was there, as we often seen him on TV afterwards, in great simplicity, just being himself. Then he took his seat, and somebody kind of said who we were, and then he invited somebody to talk on behalf of the SMA. So there was a very short presentation. Then at the end of that formal piece of his presentation and our response through the newly elected Superior General of the day, then there was an occasion. We were invited to come one by one to meet with Francis. That was very special, and as I approached him then I could see that he was there in his own gentle simplicity, open-hearted as it were, and that was the look of his face. I suppose I saw him as a kind of a very ordinary human person, very open, very warm-hearted. That's kind of my impression of him. But I suppose I would get that even from looking at pictures of him as he does presentations, that he's a people's person. But to meet him, that was certainly true, that he kind of met you, and then that's where the focus was. So it was very easy, there was no stress about meeting him. Simple shake hands, a word of greeting, and then to move the queue onwards from there.
Pope Francis came to the Philippines in January 2015 out of solidarity with the people after the typhoon in November 2013, where about 10,000 people lost their lives. So it was a 5-day visit with 3 days kind of highlighted in that. The first day, first morning, was a Mass in Manila Cathedral. And I happened to be one of the lucky ones. My name picked out of a hat for the priest of our diocese. Every diocese in the Northern Ireland had representatives. And I was, at that Mass, we were assigned seats very close to the altar. And when he delivered his homily, I was probably about 8 meters away. But the highlight of that was the gospel for that particular Mass was the end of St. John's Gospel, where Jesus asked Peter, "Do you love me?" And the deacon read that gospel and then sat down. And then the Pope came to the lectern, the ambo, to deliver the homily. And his first words were, "Do you love me?" And all the people in the cathedral shouted, "We do, we love you." And he turned around and he laughed, and he looked at the bishops behind him and he says, "I'm not asking you, do you love me?" He said, "I'm just quoting the verses from the gospel."
Do you love me? Then thank you very much. I read the word of Jesus.
It was a wonderful moment. I really appreciated that. And it showed the sheer humanity of the man. So relaxed, could laugh, could smile, could take that whole event, and even though English is not his first language, he was able to converse in it. And that was a wonderful example of his pastoral approach, so close touch with people. Then the second day was a mass down in the airport in Tacloban City, which was the center of the tsunami. That's where the epicenter, that's where most of the damage happened. So he went down there for mass. Now we felt that going there in January was a bit risky because it's the typhoon season. So on that particular day, that was the Saturday, there was heavy rain and everything. But at that mass, over his vestments, the Pope wore a yellow poncho type raincoat. And again, I thought that was a wonderful gesture. Like you could imagine kind of prelates back in Rome looking at this and saying, why is he, sacred vestments? But he was doing the best thing in the occasion. It was raining heavy. He wore this poncho over his vestments. Again, a wonderful gesture of the humanity of the man, able to catch the moment correctly, putting concern for people over anything else. And then the final part of that visit was on the Sunday with the public mass in Luneta Park in Manila. And again, there were probably, they estimated, maybe close to 6 million people at that mass. So again, it was a wonderful scene of joy and celebration and everything. So they are, I suppose, my special memories of Pope Francis. And the impression that he left with me was his humanity, his outreach to people who were suffering after the typhoon. 10,000 people lost their lives. But being able to be so relaxed and so comfortable in ordinary people's lives on solemn occasions. That's the impression he left with me.
I remember that evening in March of 2013 when the new Pope came out on the gallery in St. Peter's Square and thousands of people below him. And he just said, "Buonasera, good evening." And that kind of courtesy animated his approach to people and his approach to everything. For example, in the Sacrament of Penance, he said it's not meant to be an interrogation to shame us, it's a meeting with the mercy of God. The same with the Eucharist. He said it's not a prize for being virtuous, it's food for the journey for sinners. And that kind of approach, I think, showed us again that God's name is mercy and compassion.
During Pope Francis' visit to Ireland for the World Gathering of Families, many SMAs were in Croke Park, and from the Cusick stand, they had a commanding view of the spectacle. There was a joyous atmosphere, with singing and dancing, until the Pope arrived. Then everything was drowned out by the sound of the enthusiastic crowd. As he moved towards the stage on the Pope Mobile, the crowd chanted, "Papa, Papa," in a very warm greeting. From the stage, he watched Riverdance and looked on in amazement at the wonderful performance. Smiling and commenting to those in his company. A special moment, and it was an occasion of great happiness and joy.
Well, I have never met him face to face for a start, but obviously he won the hearts of many people, including myself, during his pontificate. And I was deeply saddened, in fact, over the last number of months that he was suffering so much. And I partly guessed that he would never pull out of it. So in many ways, it was a sense of relief for him, and indeed for many people, that he passed so quietly and in such a magnificent setting, having done what he's been doing all his life, being with people and blessing them and giving him his time and his energy. So that's the one thing that struck me about him all his life, was giving his time and his energy to people, no matter what situation they were in, and in whatever continent of the world they were in. That was one thing that stayed with me all through his pontificate. In the work he did to try and bring unity into the church and all of that, well, many more eloquent people than me know about that and have written and spoken very well about it. He did his best, but it's not an easy road, and it will take a lot more time, goodwill and prayers by all of us.
As many people are aware, of course, Pope Francis, he was a great man to write his thoughts and his concerns about the world. So in 2015, he published that wonderful Laudato Si document. And that's a document that talks to us about our world. So he was concerned about our world and trying to create an awareness in the minds and hearts of all peoples that the world is our home, and that it belongs to all, not to any one or group of people, and that all of us are responsible for taking care of it. And I think when I met him, that would come across too, that. Then he wrote another lovely one, Fratelli Tutti, and he wrote that in 2020, and that is when he really focused that we are together as family, brothers and sisters. And that was kind of launched into a world that is divided for all sorts of reasons. So it was that kind of, you'd feel that when you met him, that he wasn't for a group or individual, but that he was for all people. And I suppose I'd see his role as Pope then, as he was Pope and leader to all of us in the church. And his contact with people who are not even church, that he was there for them and with them also. So that is a very important document, I think, also. And then latterly, we had the wonderful launch that he made called Synodality, and that's ongoing. So he was present at the opening and partaking of the discussions that took place there. So many people will have seen or read about that. And there you could see him trying to say, we're together, we're family. And that's the synodal process, that it's not sections divided, but that we are together. And we're all members of God's family, and he's encouraging us to bring that alive in our own localities, communities, places, and to be that kind of inclusive, caring people.
So at the Synod on Synodality, I had a very funny experience that Pope Francis really enjoyed. It was the first week of the first assembly on the Synod on Synodality, and we had to choose the person who would report from our table to the assembly. And my table had voted for me. Now, my name being Mary Barron, also at the table was the famous Bishop Robert Barron. So when our facilitator sent the name into the secretariat, he sent in my name, but they saw Barron and presumed it was Bishop Barron. So when they started to call the different speakers to present the reports from the table, and there were 37 tables, when the name started appearing, the name for our table came up as Bishop Robert Barron. So we already knew in advance that they were going to call Bishop Robert Barron. I said maybe Bishop Barron should read the report, and the table said, no, we voted for you. You must report for us. So we then realized we had been told at the Synod, you don't change your chair because the camera is fixed on your chair with your name. We had forgotten this. So Bishop Robert and I decided to swap seats. So I moved into Bishop Robert Barron's seat. The name was called. The reporter from the next table is Bishop Robert Barron, and my face appears to the whole Synod hall. So I simply said, contrary to what is on the screen, contrary to what has been announced, the report from this table is not from Bishop Robert Barron, but is from the other Barron in the room, Sister Mary Barron, at which the whole Synod hall started to laugh. That was fine. I did my report. At the end, the president delegate for the day thanked Eminenza Barron. So afterwards, that same day, I went to greet Pope Francis, and straight away he said, Excellenza Baron, Excellenza Baron. And he was really amused by this. And for the rest of the synod, this is what he called me. So one day when I went to him and he said, "Excellence, Baron," I said, "Non ancora, Papa," meaning not yet. And he really enjoyed that. So that was my beautiful memory of Pope Francis from the synod.
Well, as we remember Pope Francis, who has now gone home to the house of the Lord, I suppose one of the things that come to my own mind are the different kind of interactions that I had with him personally, and we as a group of bishops had. We had an ad limina visit in 2017, and he was very informal, very easy to hear and to talk and to joke even in our conversations. And I suppose one of the most interesting things about it was that even though his English was at times okay, in fact he had very little English. His two working languages were Italian and Spanish, primarily Spanish obviously. So he invariably had an interpreter with him. And after about an hour of our ad limina visit, we were all seated in a circle around him. He gets up, we were wondering where he was going, went down to the end of the hall, poured out a glass of water, and brought the glass of water back up to the interpreter to explain that that man has been working so hard and is probably afraid to go down and get the water himself. So up got Francis and down to the hall and got it. Equally, he would be, when you're coming in someplace or going out, he'd be turning the lights on and off, switches, which I suppose is a sign of a man who has lived in a community. And he knew that if you were going in and out of rooms, you turn off the lights or you turn them on. And you just don't let them on as if it was somebody else's business. And then there was the visit that we had to Ireland here when he came to visit us for the family gathering in 2018, and the informality of that, which was really surprising. I suppose the strongest personal memory that I have of that was the Mass in the Phoenix Park, where the previous week the weather was beautiful, and on that day we had a wind and a rain that cut us in two. And he spoke at that Mass at the very beginning in Spanish. And the Spanish was about the prayers that he had written himself during the night with regard to the whole abuse scandals. And he hadn't got them translated, he didn't write them in Italian. It came from his own heart and his own language that he wanted no mistake in the words that he was going to say. No one could misunderstand what he was saying. And I think that was one of the most striking visits. We met him afterwards then in the Dominican house near the Nunciature on the Navan Road. And again, very informal, very easy. But I think he was tired. So by the time that four of the archbishops went to the airport then to see him off, he was tired at that stage and was happy, I'd say, to return to Rome. But was pleased with his visit. We asked him, and again, we were speaking in Italian, that he was happy and pleased that he had come and took off up into the air, which was certainly a very informal, a very easy visit. I mean, they had said to him and said to people, there'll be no selfies at the Croke Park Mass, for instance. But there were, of course, and he stood in smiling for them all the time. That even though the officials had said there'll be no selfies, he overrode that completely. You know, so it's a man, a very human, a very, you might almost say, ordinary man who was very conscious of the role that he had and the position that he had, but at the same time never lost the touch for the smallest things that somebody who belonged to a religious institute would have noticed.